Good evening, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives 2. And this evening, I'm delighted to have David Cranmer, Underdown, back with me for a pre-Thanksgiving warm-up. Hello, David. How are you tonight?
I'm good. Thanks for having me back.
Yes, well, it's good to have you back. And we chatted a minute before the show, and I'm sorry to hear that your dad is ill right now, and so we can't attend the dinner with your family, but you will. And I was I was thinking this is the time now that we've been worried about that this fall, when they say things like dark winter, and now, there's been sickness around me. I was just talking by email to a prospective guest over in Europe, and he has COVID, and so it's this is the time that uh, we've been thinking it's going to be tough, and we're going to have to hang together and get through it. And so, to me, Thanksgiving, is has sometimes been difficult, but I try to maintain, the tradition in some way. I don't have to do much tomorrow; just cook a small turkey and enjoy dinner with my wife. And thanks everybody, she's doing really good. So that's a little thing to do, but to carry on the tradition of Thanksgiving against all of the uh, stuff that we're going through right now, I suppose in a way it's really good for us. It's kind of like, you know what? Slow down and concentrate on being grateful. Just, I know things are going to heck in a handcart or however you want to put it, but just breathe in and out and 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 think about all the great things that you have, that I have, that we each have. And one of the biggest things is, to me, is our ability to join together and reason things out, to think things through, to really have a discussion that is worth having, so that by the time we're done, that we've got somewhere, we've learned something, or we've been able to uh, relax about something we were worried about, or whatever. But that the power of humanity, of humans, to work out problems, to me, is a unique thing that, I just don't think that you could possibly create that. Humans couldn't create humans. Something greater, in my opinion, has had to have a hand in our amazing abilities, and the amazing things that humanity has accomplished on the positive side. Um, so in looking at your research as I study it this week, and I've been following your Twitter pretty closely, I see you've gotten into a lot of nasty, nasty, nasty things like Chatham House, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, which jumps right out of our studies the other night of Tavistock Institute, and how awful it really is to realize that there is an entire department of a major national government devoted to trying to make things come apart and make people unhappy, and not like their government, and aim that at us, the good people, the ones that have fought for liberty. Um, okay, John, that's enough out of me. David, you have the floor, and welcome. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me again. I do feel like I go, just fast trying to unravel the different characters and names. The more that I learn, I feel like the better I am at fine tuning it. And um, with the Chatham House, I didn't really know much about European history, and of course, I'm always use my own personal experiences to try to understand this stuff, because as we've discussed before, you know, it's incredible the connections, like the way your father went to a high school, a boarding school that featured a lot of famous names of, you know, influential people. That's very similar to my experience. And it's hard because personally knowing the characters, they don't, it doesn't seem possible that they would be, um you know, in those you know, capable of being in a Chatham House, or what I consider to be the U.S. version, the Council on Foreign Relations,
Yeah.
is the brother organization that was created at the same time with American industrialists that had business and banking relationships with their European partners. One thing that I did want to get into tonight was, you know, I've been enjoying your, you know, history of Maryland and Virginia, and one of the families that ties into Thanksgiving is the Harrison family. Benjamin Harrison. He was part of the Berkeley Hundred, which was one of the first Virginia Company colonies, and in their charter, they actually claim that they had to say Thanksgiving. I think it's a week or 2 weeks before the Plymouth, Massachusetts Bay Plymouth colony, which everybody learns about with the Thanksgiving. But the Berkeley Hundred actually, they claim to, in their charter, that they have to say Thanksgiving as part of their charter. And family is interesting to me, is because they ended up in Indiana territories, becoming the governor of the Northwest Territories in Vincennes, Indiana, which is an area that my mom's family is from close. I mean, when she was a little girl growing up in Princeton, Indiana, she used to buy shoes in Vincennes. So that's how, you know, we know this stuff is from, you know, visiting my grandparents. But one of the, you know, again, with these, you know, Indiana just seeming like this, you know, very Midwestern, family oriented. My grandparents were, you know, my grandma was a fourth grade teacher. My grandpa was a electrical engineer at RCA, which is a, you know, a whole story. Because again, I didn't know RCA was an international, you know, company that is, you know, very part of the intelligence community. But one of the, so as I'm studying sort of these Carlisle groups and the history of Standard Oil, one of the names that I got today was named Sarah Noxie. Uh, let's see, Sarah Noxie Taylor. Sarah Noxie Taylor was the daughter of Zachary Taylor, the president. She was named Noxie because Vincennes was called Fort Knox II, where she was born. Her father was a general, and she was an Army girl and born in Vincennes, Indiana, which was the capital of the Northwest Territories. She married Jefferson Davis. Jefferson Davis was a young Army lieutenant under Zachary Taylor, and they met in a camp that Taylor was Davis's commanding officer. So they got married, and she actually died of malaria 3 weeks after after their wedding in Louisiana. Now, the reason this name came out was because I've been studying the William Stamps Farish family. And William Stamps Farish was the founder of Humble Oil, which Humble Oil becomes the Standard Oil Company of New Jersey, which becomes Exxon. Exxon Standard Oil of New Jersey is the Standard Oil Company that does the Baku oil deal with Bronnable, which was the noble, the Swedish family. And Walter Teagle was the name of the man that ran that. But as I'm studying this more, Farish, William Stamps Farish, was actually the principal of Exxon. So William Stamps Farish was very close family friends with the Bushes in Houston. He was the one that brought Poppy Bush to Houston after he graduated from Yale. Their sons were friends, and Barbara Bush was friends with the wife. The wife was a Rice, like Rice University. The Rice University was founded by, very unusual. It was Rice was a wealthy guy that died in his sleep. The butler administered chloroform to him in his sleep, and he died. And um, his butler was named Jones. I don't know if it's related to Jesse Jones, who later becomes the Reconstruction Finance Committee, but his lawyer was James Baker. And James Baker is the one that founds the Baker Botts law firm in Houston, which is the grandfather of James Baker that becomes the chief counsel of Carlyle Group, Enron, and also was Secretary of State under Reagan, and is very tightly associated with Poppy Bush, with George Shultz, and Caspar Weinberger, all of those characters. So this Houston is interesting to me because the Jesse Jones, who was the head of the Reconstruction Finance Committee, he's the one that set up the Port of Houston. So the Port of Houston became a major port, especially once the Panama Canal was completed. And I know I was sending some stuff about the steamships, but that Port of Houston became a really important port. And the other name that was a Houston person who family owned the Houston Post, and her husband was the Governor Hobby, was not Evita, it's like Evita Hobby, and she was the head of the Health, Education, and Welfare Board, which was in her era was the one that encouraged the Jonas Salk polio vaccine, and she quit because of the Cutter incident. Now, the other just like facts that are intriguing about that was they also owned the television station that later Joanne Herring, whose husband was the Herring that founded Enron, Houston Gas Company. She was also the next door neighbor of James Baker growing up in Houston. And she was the Charlie Wilson angel girl that was starred in the Charlie Wilson's War that did the Operation Cyclone, that was the arming of the Mujahideen, which we know was also the Safari Club and the BCCI bank story. So there's a lot of, wild connections going from Vincennes, Indiana, to this Farish family, which was Humble Oil and then Exxon. And of course, that ties into your Rockefeller because Standard Oil was under the Rockefeller umbrella. So that's just like some of the linking that I'm trying to do, just to, because even now, Exxon, it was Trump had Rex Tillerson as his Secretary of State, and he was the chairman of Exxon. And like William Teagle, who was the involved in the Baku Branable pre Bolshevik Revolution oil deal, Tillerson was in the Rosneft and Glencore CEFC China Siberian pipeline deal that is the Belt and Road. So you can take these old oil companies going back to the early 1900s to deals that are in play now, and the whole Hunter Biden with his activity with CEFC, which is the Chinese bank with the CEO going missing. there's a lot of intrigue there that, like what George is doing with this Galveston lab, and of course that lab being, Houston is a neighbor, Waco and Houston and Galveston are all right there. And, I feel like these stories are just completely missed. And for me, it's frustrating because, I feel like these are really important stories and there's a lot of legacy that can be studied and, added to it. And, I'm trying to, put it together and be helpful, but it is, there's a lot of dark angles to it, but there's also a lot of connections that are really important.
Extremely important. And I felt like a kid in a classroom where I really like the teacher and I really want to ask a question, but at the same time I don't want to interrupt the teacher because I like what they're saying. So I'm trying to remember a number of questions that popped up. And the first one, would it not have been uh, a, De Mohrenschildt's father that did the deal on the Russian side? Um, eh, we're talking about the Baku deal,
Right.
and the De Mohrenschildt was, I think, the son of the representative of the Tsar
Hmm.
in the Grenoble deal. So if that pans out, and I think it does, then there's a whole nother string of connections that just come right forward to the Kennedy assassination.
Right. That's what I'm trying to get to, is lay foundation for people to understand that Lee Harvey Oswald is an important character, but there's a legacy of these multinational corporations that is the real interest there. So trying to understand JFK's role, with his father being the and many times described as a robber baron. He was a Wall Street guy. He became the ambassador to England. He had conflict with during World War II over partnering with going against the Russians or versus the Germans. And again, like the other part of the Exxon, Humble Oil, and Farish family was that Farish was also the representative for the IG Farben brokering, which we know was lawyered by Sullivan and Cromwell by the Dulleses, but the corporate interest was the Exxon Standard Oil Teagle interest, and they created a company, an American subsidy called IG Chemi, which was the American version, and that had Teagle on the board of directors, and then up in Michigan it had Edsel Ford was also on the board of that. And I've been doing a lot of study on the history of the aerospace industry, because I do think that the General Dynamics takeover of the F-111 project is a very material item to consider for why Kennedy may have been assassinated. If he would have been somebody that would have steered that project to Boeing and not to Consolidated Air and General Dynamics, who did get the bid for that. Fletcher Prouty says that was, one of the largest aerospace contracts ever given. And of course, growing up in Michigan with the Willow Run Rosie the Riveter story, that was Consolidated Air and Douglas Aircraft that partnered with Ford to make the Willow Run, which was the Air Force plant number 4, I believe, that did the B-24 Liberator, which was also done in Fort Worth, Texas. So after the World War II, the Willow Run, they stopped making the airplanes. They instead make them in Fort Worth, and the plant is purchased by Henry Kaiser, who is again a big name. Kaiser was building the Liberty ships. He was a partner of Bechtel with John McCone, and he did the six company deal. He had 30% of the six companies, which built the Hoover Dam, and he started Kaiser Permanente, which was the first healthcare program in the United States in Oakland. He also built the aluminum factories along the Columbia River. He's a big name, and of course, I feel like people don't know that name. They don't know Bechtel either. Your dad's rival George Schultz, was a big director at Bechtel, and their history was they partnered with Standard Oil of California to build the first pipeline in California. They did the Trans-Arabian pipeline. They did the Yukon pipeline, which was part of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which was part of Teapot Dome. So they're a really important company. They had Caspar Weinberger, who is a name that's sort of new to me, but he was a big Iran-Contra player, and so all these things are they're connected, and that's what I'm trying to do, because again, I it's hard it's hard for me to imagine this, growing up in Detroit, because Detroit is just not it's a shell of what I think it was.
Yeah.
But this and again, like studying this Tavistock and the whole psychological warfare operations that happened, University of Michigan, as you said, yesterday, it really is a major component of it, and that's because of the Ford Foundation arm in there. And they named they had a Ford nuclear reactor, a private nuclear reactor at Willow Run. They had the Michigan Aeronautical Research Center at Willow Run, which created the Bomark missile, which was the first guided missile program, was done at Michigan. And they had PBS started there, the first station for the PBS public broadcast, and that was Ford Foundation financed. So again, like, growing up, we'd always heard that Henry Ford was the big industrialist, and then Edsel Ford was the had the Edsel car that was a failure, and that's kind of was like the end of the story. Like, Edsel didn't do much, but the reality is that Edsel was involved in a lot of things, and it's it's hard because again, these are like people that live in my community, and then of course I have my own family history. I mean, I told you about my great grandpa that worked under Alex Dow. That Alex Dow had Detroit Edison, and Henry Ford was also an engineer at under Dow before he started his auto company. So he died in 1930, and that was sort of the end of the story for that. But it's doing this, learning this history, I feel like there's a lot more there, and I don't want to like take things personally, like things weren't just accidents, but I really am just trying to learn all the characters so that I can build a complete picture for it, because it's there's just a lot to the story.
It sure is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I look at I I I consider you to be one of my great success stories, because you started with Fletcher Prouty, and it was Fletcher Prouty that really let me see what's going on. That there really is a secret team. That they really do take orders from outside the chain of command, especially if the name is Sullivan and Cromwell, Rockefeller, or associated names from the New England establishment, Bundy, for instance. All of these things are real hidden conspiracies hiding behind secret oaths and smelly robes and uh, and family tradition. The family tradition part is very important with these aristocratically minded people, and that's where we get a lot of information from digging into the genealogy, which you're doing, and they can't deny it. But they are, as Mark Kulak of Housatonic is saying, they are stripping information out of the newspapers right and left. Um, think about newspapers.com and how that is becoming the source for people to go find old news clippings. And if it's not on newspapers.com, can you still find it? I was looking at the Hartford Courant because a lot of my dad's stuff is going to be in there. And I don't think you can actually get direct from the Hartford Courant. You have to go through something like newspapers.com now, and that gives them a filter that they can say, oh, that we can that little word shouldn't have been on. It should have been no, and they'll change it, and nobody will ever know in order to fit their narrative of history because they're creating a, a narrative that will be sold to children in high school history classes in the future as the gospel truth. That's what we learned from studying the Chatham House and the Royal Institute and the CFR, and because they really are determined to create a false reality that is based on a narrative that they are going to create to hide all of their misdeeds behind. And this is real. And so your work is fantastic. I'm really proud to have you as part of my journey here in figuring out my own life. So yeah, and it is. Yeah, I mean, you say it's hard. Of course, it's hard. It's hard, but boy, it sure is better than not doing it. You know, I mean, if you don't do it, then what do you do? Sit around and watch television, or play video games? You know, if you have money, maybe you travel, you take up golf or something, but where's the satisfaction? This is what my life has been teaching me is and it reminds me of when I had some real counseling. I had unfortunately had a divorce back in the early '90s, and I went to a counselor, and it turns out that he was one of those ones that I think is part of the the bad guys. He was an Air Force psychiatrist or psychologist, and he talked about having been stationed at Haight Ashbury during the drug revolution, and his kind of counseling was that I should put the past behind me. And he said that I was haunted by ghosts, and that my father and my grandfather were the ghosts, and that I was too fixated on trying to please them or figure out, who they were. And so I needed to just be myself and, you know, full speed ahead. And, that sounded like what I needed to do. So that kept me from investigating back then, 30 years ago. It was only when I finally got some respite from my law practice that I could have some breathing room and start digging into this stuff. And I'm glad I have. Everything I've learned has been both good and bad, as you say. When it involves a family member, and you start realizing that, oh, I wouldn't have expected to learn that about that person, or and then they do things that hurt you, and you wonder, why did they do that? Didn't they know that was going to hurt me? But you can't ask them because it just there's no real answer. You're trying to, you said an interesting thing, trying to understand how people can do things like we talk about. How can they do it? And this is where I'm been fascinated too. And it really does honestly just boil down to the decision of whether you are living by the golden rule or are you living by the rule of gold. Which is it? And if you are acting like you're living by the rule of gold, and that's what your friends do, and that's what everybody that you see does, and that's what you watch that kind of that kind of stuff on TV, and the the idea of acquiring another vacation home or having an exotic you know wine or whatever, the thing that turns you on is the possession and enjoyment of stuff right now in this life. That's what turns you on. That's like the rule of gold. That's like I'm going to be a servant of the the empire. That's what the empire wants. They want people that are just going to do whatever it takes to get up to the next level in the empire. How do I'm a major, but I'd really like to be a colonel. How do I get to be a colonel? And then you say, well, you go down to the horse guards there and you talk to Lord Shelburne and you give him 100,000 pounds, and guess what? You'll be a colonel. Oh, thanks for telling me. I'll just go get some money from mom and I'll go become a colonel. Now I know how to do it. I don't. I am. Learning more and more and more about the difference between the people that go by the golden rule and the people that go by the rule of gold. And once you identify them, then you can't try to change them. You just have to accept it. Well, for whatever reason, at some fork in the road, they went left and I went right. And they went that way, and I'm different from them now. And they're different from me. So I can't be responsible for trying to counsel them or help them to see the wrongs that they're doing or any of that stuff, because they have made their decision. And that's where this incredible willingness to actually go into Satanism and all this, this hellfire club from the time we were reading about in the 1700s, and people have been doing it for centuries, just saying I give up on spirituality. I give up on the idea of an afterlife. I don't care about all this Christian stuff, and I'm going to have a good time, and I'm going to participate with people that are going to exploit, and that what George and I used to talk about, the 333, the 333, meaning the borderline between the, everything good on the up and everything down, whatever, what it all balances out. You can be good during the daytime and bad during the night. You can be a monk during the daytime and a rapacious Knight Templar at night. And that balance, that kind of a life is what the empire wants. They want you to live along the means. The end justifies the means. You have to go out and rape and burn and pillage because that's going to make you a better monk tomorrow morning. I can't figure it out, but that is the mentality. I guarantee you. You can study it for another 10 years, but that's what it's going to come down to, is that people have just decided, the heck with God, the heck with spirituality, the heck with anything about morality. I just am going to go with the flow, have a good time, and when it's time for me to check out, I'll just say, "Okay, fine, I'm gone. Take me, because I'm ready to go." And it's a really defeated way of looking at life, and I'm sad to see people, so many people doing it. And then what we do worse is we vote for people that are like that. We put them in office. Well, how can we do that? Well, we haven't got any way to examine our candidates anymore. It's all hidden behind screens, and everything's everything seems to be prearranged now. And that gets us back to the whole Tavistock RIA and Chatham House, and how insidious and how effective they've been in subverting our republic. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as the what you first said about the counseling and having the Air Force person doing that, I mean, if you're following the Professor Hamamoto, he feels like that whole counseling is infiltrated by these groups, whether they're a direct, employee of the or former employee of the military, or if they're just trained under that philosophy. The when I think about as far as the characters that are in office now, I mean, again, like I was friends with the brother of a girl that's a congresswoman now, that's on the intelligence committee with Adam Schiff and with Swalwell and the whole gang. And I'd slumber parties at their house, and she was CIA, openly, but I didn't feel like their family was into anything crazy like that. I mean, I went to his bar mitzvah. I knew his family. I mean, they didn't seem like they were into some crazy thing. But again, there are a lot of families that they didn't stand out either. That were influential for as far as like locally. So it's hard to know. I mean, honestly, like I don't really talk to a lot of people right now because I'm just so curious. I'm trying to understand so much history, like such a big arc of history. And it's very gratifying for me just to try to learn it and learn the names and the characters and to put it together, because again, it doesn't seem a lot of it doesn't seem possible. Like with my dad, when his best friend in his childhood was Peter Booth's his name, and his grandparents were Scripps grandma, or his grandparents were the people that founded the Cranbrook School. And I think I've mentioned this a couple times, but there are a Scripps and a Booth. And if you go through the history, I mean, he should be like a Jeff Bezos. If you go through like kind of like what their connections were. I mean, they owned the Reuters and bunch of newspapers. I was just learning today that the guy named Bill Stout, that was the person that created the Ford Tri-Motor that became the Ford's aircraft engine. He was the engineer at the Scripps Booth Auto Company, and then he became the head of the he partnered with Packard, which we've talked about Packard with the V12 Liberty engine, and with Carl Fisher, who was the guy that he started the Indy 500. He's from Indianapolis, but he did the Dixie Highway and the Lincoln Highway, which was the precursor to the the interstate system. He's the one that owned Fisher Island, that he traded to William Kissam Vanderbilt for a yacht. That William Kissam Vanderbilt is the one that owned the property on Long Island called Lake Success, which was the temporary United Nations headquarters before they completed the construction in New York City. So this this Stout, who was an engineer for the Booth Scripps, Peter's great uncle was E.W. Scripps, that he was the guy that flew the plane under the Belle Isle Bridge. But Stout was the engineer also for the Ford's interests in their aviation business, and that became the Detroit Aircraft Company, which, if you look at that history, they owned literally everybody, Lockheed, and it was like 12 different airlines, and they all went bankrupt when we had the Depression, and there was the bank holiday. The federal bank holiday was followed by the state bank holiday of Michigan, because the Guardian Union Bank went bankrupt, and that was Edsel and Henry Ford again that were in charge of that. And it was $300 million in 1933 that left Detroit, and the Union Bank, the Guardian Bank, was declared bankrupt. And then it was saved by the Reconstruction Finance Committee in 1933, and that was Eugene Mayer, who was the the Federal Reserve chairman. He was the World Bank chairman. His daughter was Kay Graham. He's the Washington Post. Again, there's a newspaper. I mean, but he was also Allied Chemical Company, which was the big explosives, kind of like a DuPont. So all of these, again, all these characters, because Edsel Ford was married to the founder of Hudson Motor. And of course, in Detroit, Hudson was, I feel like everybody that grew up in a big city, you have your local big department store. And in Detroit, there was Hudson, Kearns, and oh my gosh, this is the Crowley Milners, the two worst names. And of course, that's our family friend. It was the owner of that in Grosse Pointe. My mom's best friend was married to the Crowley Milner department store, and they are literally the most nicest people. And again, even with those two names, because we talked about the Chatham House. Well, Lionel Curtis, he founded the Milner round. He worked under Milner in the De Beers and in the South African colony. He was, that was his. He started the Round Table. And he was, worked with Lord Milner. So these names are like, I'm like, because I was always like, well, there's this nice family. They don't seem like they, that there was anything crazy. But then I learned that Edsel's wife, the Hudson Company, Hudson was the Fisher body, which was the Catholic Fishers that sold their Fisher body to General Motors. They tried to buy the Hudson Automobile Company, which also made military equipment like all the auto companies in Detroit. Well, when they tried to buy it, the real stock owner of that was the queen of the Dutch queen, the father of Bernard that founds the World Wildlife Foundation with Philip and with the not the brave. It's Aldous Huxley wrote The Brave New World, which was based on Fordlandia, which was Henry Ford's rubber plantation in Brazil. He based it on that. But the other brother was Julian Huxley, and Julian Huxley is the one that came up with the idea for the World Wildlife Fund. So again, it's like Hudson's is gone. There's no Hudson Motor, but if you go through this history, those connections are real. And that, it's I was going through the whole history of sort of the Dutch West Indies Company, and they were the first multinational corporation, the first their shares were on the Amsterdam Exchange, where they had sort of the private issue and then the publicly traded shares. And then, the person that kind of reintroduced it was and I can't think of her name. She's the one that married she married the son of the Bernard, but her father was the Argentina president that was involved with Kissinger in Operation Condor. That was her dad that was in that with the Pinochet. I think he was the Secretary of Agriculture there. But again, it's like, trying to tie, going back to the old trade companies with this sort of the industrialization, the build up to the World War II, and then to now, it's I feel like I'm, trying to make really good, strong connections and all that stuff so that people can, understand why they would execute a president, in front of the world and create, because again, if you study Tavistock, mass trauma is the way to create the greatest herd effect and indoctrination, is to have mass trauma. So I mean, to use that tactic is it's crazy, but that's what they did. You know, there's a lot that they hid by making that move, and that's what I like to do, is try to figure out what all of the what they were up to, what they're hiding, you know, by doing something so awful that just scarred people. You know, even 60 years later, people are still traumatized by it, and also infuriated by the fact that the resolution was just absurd. The whole Warren Commission is just you know, it's just an unsatisfying conclusion to a horrible event, and they've left that open wound for basically everybody. I mean, I wasn't obviously born or anything, but it's a horrible thing to do to people.
Well, yeah, it's a horrible, horrible thing to do to people, and what's even worse, as you say, is to keep it covered up for so long. And you wonder what the motive is. I'll just my opinion is the motive is to eventually have a completely totalitarian control over every human on the planet. I mean, that to me is the goal, and I think there's many indications of that's why, especially with these passport card thingies that to me are the mark of the beast. This is straight out of Revelations, where uh, nobody will be able to do any commerce unless you have the mark of the beast. In the Bible, it was 666, and you had to have it, on your body somewhere, or else. And this was, of course, the prediction of John the Evangelist that this was what the future was going to bring. But it's when a when the population as a whole is familiar with the Bible stories and has a sense of religious belief in them, then uh, a Tavistock can't help but try and take advantage of that. And this is, again, uh, we have this pre-programming of the book of Revelations. So, like Bill Cooper's book, a pale, what is it, a pale horse? The when the four horsemen of the apocalypse come along, and this is part of popular culture in a huge way that has that kind of Jungian feeling to me that it's one of those archetype things that they want to play with. Like they have their archetypes of the hero or the fool or the whatever that they say recur in human society, and you can always create these characters and use them to fulfill the role that you need done. And with a little bit of smoke and mirrors, you can convince people that these are genuine, events and genuine facts. And I think a lot of that is what's going on. But getting back to the general theme, I see um, the whole stretching of the language to make it a pandemic. To say, well, we're going to change the definition of it so that we can meet the conditions that we had already set up with the Congress to get the money. And so now we have a quote unquote, and so now we get the trillions of dollars just because we say that it's a pandemic, and they, who having been through the revolving door are completely cooperative with us, will agree with us. And so the American people have just, decided to buy, $3 trillion worth of stuff. That, to me, is kind of desperate looking. It looks to me like they're really, really have to close all these deals fast, and they're putting a lot of pressure on us, a lot of pressure. So that's my theory: is that there's a force behind all of these other characters that wants to completely encompass all of the economy and thereby control through some type of numerical or fixation through radio waves or little copper dots in your body or somehow, like numbering the sheep. And then what do you do next? Well, you play with them. You see what's going to happen and you bet. This guy's going to live this long. This guy's probably going to not live so long. And that's what insurance companies do. And that's just where I think all of that real money is. It's all sitting in the bottom of Travelers and the Hartford and uh, all the big insurers and Swiss Re and you know on and on and on. To me, I mean, again, my theory about the economy is that the economy is now being elevated above the goodwill. I mean, the welfare of the people, so that it's more important to sustain this economy, no matter what, than it is to protect the welfare of the people. And this is where the government has been taken over by the ones that run the economy, as opposed to the ones that have been elected for the purpose of protecting us and seeing to our general welfare. So I keep coming to the same thing. This is some kind of a long, 100-year, 200-year, 300-year, whatever you want to say, plot to eventually envelop everything under the same roof, and use the same currency and have a way of controlling right down to the individual what human beings do or are allowed to do or are not allowed to do. And that's the creepiness that I fear. Um, but why? Why? What do you think?
Well,
That's my theory.
I mean, I try to look at historical, super cycles of economic systems, and the most recent one is the German economy, and with the you know, going from the Kaiser to then losing World War I, and you know, having the the Paris peace treaty and the Versailles peace treaty. This is where these Chatham houses and the Council on Foreign Relations came from. The and again, trying to learn the characters who organized these things, because it's the same groups, but they gave the Germany was given the reparations for Weimar, Weimar Republic. Their currency collapsed, but then of course they had the great um, rebirth, and I do, wonder, because again, in my lifetime, Detroit has always been a depressing place to live. Where I live in the suburbs is absolutely beautiful. It's as nice of a community as anywhere, but the city of Detroit is a depressing place. And so I didn't have, I've lived in New York. I went to college in Boston. I visited a lot of really nice cities. And so I've always been sort of confused by these, national versus more local things. But, I do feel like we're in a Dutch tulip phase, or a South Sea bubble, or a Mississippi Company bubble phase right now. I mean, I've felt this my entire adult life, since I started studying economics. Um, I always wanted to understand things, and the numbers never made sense. There's no way that things could be repaid. So they just, like they're doing with with the medicine, it becomes just talking points. It's saying you don't understand the new system, or our experts have analyzed this and just take our word for it. It's the same, like you said, the same word play, and trying to understand which groups do that. And I don't really follow a lot of the coverage, but I am also very afraid, because the you know the history, we had the Russia for the for 4 years. Nobody once talked about Rosneft and a Trans-Siberian pipeline deal with China and with Glencore, and why that may have been, why we're don't like Putin, as opposed to, just saying that he's, this madman theory, that's trigger happy, that, if we don't, if we piss him off, he's gonna, do something stupid. Like, that's how they message it. But I have great empathy for Russia, because I look at World War I and World War II, and they had 60 million people die, between 30 years. So it's, and that's sadly, like, part of the signature of this is they will genocide you, and then 50 years later be like, you're still the terrible, you're still the crazy one, you're the bad guy. And it's and that's, there's no signs that anyone has changed really as far as who's making these decisions. So you study their past playbook, and sadly, starvation is a play that they use. And, I wonder about, with these port situations, and, with Biden talking about, using it as leverage to getting people to submit to experimental medicine. Like, it's, I told you before the show about my own situation with my family, and it's just, I don't have enough information. I don't know if everything is the same. I am terrified of what has happened with my family, but I don't know. And that's part of the problem, is that now I just live with the anxiety of just hoping that everything turns out okay, and that, that everybody lives a long, healthy life. But I don't know that. And that's part of what makes it so frustrating, is that, again, like with our, charrettes, where we were going over the beginning, and who the characters were, and exposing them, and with George just doing such an incredible job of guiding us and giving us a foundation and a framework to study. Like, it's gotten us nowhere. I mean, we've had all of the top experts that have, been involved, and it's rejected. And for me, that's, it's hard for me, because I obviously want my family to be healthy more than anything. But, I hate being like the gloom and doom person. But, you know, Paul Warburg wrote the Federal Reserve Act, right? Who's, the Warburg Pincus is who financed Kissinger and Associates. You've got Blinken's dad was the founder of Pincus Warburg. And then you have Timothy Geithner, who did, he was a Treasury Secretary, and then he's now the president, or the CEO of Warburg Pincus. So the same characters, the same banks, the same groups are all there. Blinken is Secretary of State. So it's, and then you look at the library that the Blinken's dad created in Hungary, which was the George Soros Open Society library, which keeps the records of the Voice of America, which Alan Dulles created for the CIA in, I think, 49. That's who's finances that. So again, it's like the Secretary of State we currently have is a Warburg Pincus person whose stepfather was Robert Maxwell's business partner or lawyer. His real father was a founder of Pincus Warburg. The previous Secretary of State was, I know we had the Kansas guy in there between, but Rex Tillerson was the Pompeo, sorry. Tillerson was the Exxon CEO, the Exxon Mobil CEO that was doing the deal with Russia. So again, it's like, I know people want, you talk about I can't handle any kind of a political cheerleading at this point, where it's like, I'm a Democrat, or I'm a Republican, or we need to get Donald Trump back on the scene. Like, I just don't see any differentiation between the characters. To me, it's just Tavistock branding. It's Rand Corporation branding. They're all in the same old network. And, I don't, again, I can't offer good solutions other than just trying to understand the network and then just post about it. I'm hopeful that it will, help unlock some of these, you know, cover stories that we've lived with. Some of them, so big as a JFK, but there's others that I think are equally as big that are just glossed over. And, nobody wants to talk about, just reliving the past. I mean, your therapist told you to just forget the past and just move forward. And, I was just saying, I was frustrated a lot my whole life. I mean, I never got married, but I had a lot of frustrations and went to therapy. And it was the same thing. I mean, I would go to yoga, and the yoga was all, was about, living in the moment, and the past is history and the future's unknown. So just live in the current moment. And, I take in all of that kind of information, but, I don't have any like strong, you talk about the, understanding the stories of the Bible. I'm somebody that never has read the Bible. Um, I was really, uncomfortable, I guess, with the religious things growing up, so I never really latched onto it. But it's something that I feel like I do need to look into, to again try to get some understanding, because so much is just, for me at this point, is just it's just unbelievable, and I can just dismiss a lot, based on knowing where it comes from. But for most people, that's not the case.
Well, the story of the Bible and early Christianity was again to me just like you. I didn't think it was be worthwhile studying. I thought, well, it's probably just a bunch of stories that have been garbled and mangled and used for this and that over the centuries, and who knows what was the original anyway. So I didn't really respect it very much. But I guess it was about 20 years ago I started thinking, well, what is the real, what do we actually have? We have fragments of any of these actually written down the first time, and I started studying that, and the very first ones that written fragments that we have are dated, we think in the range of about 90 AD, which is within the lifetime of people that would have been alive during Jesus's lifetime. So I started thinking, well, maybe this is not such a not maybe it's worth studying. So I did. I spent a good bit of time digging into the Bible stories and Saint Paul and all of it. There's a number of interesting popular writers. One of them is named Bart Ehrman, Ehrman, who really breaks it down, because he was a gung ho, kind of Liberty University Christian, and he studied. But what he did was he was a really good scholar, and so he studied Aramaic and Hebrew and biblical Greek, and become a terrific scholar in this. And now he's been able to enlighten a lot of us that get that far, but you have to conquer your first. You have to first understand, the four synoptic gospels and how they fit together, and what's the difference between this one and that one, and why, did the loaves and the fishes come first in this guy's story, but afterward in the other guy's story, and you start. Oh, well, it's interesting. That just tells you that there's word of mouth going on there. It doesn't mean it's a lie. It just is. That's the way humans are. You expect that from witnesses. You expect to have a little variation. Well, interesting stuff to get into, but it's a little late to start on the Bible tonight.
Yeah.
It has been another pleasure for me to see just what you've been working on. As I say, I follow you on Twitter, and I think everybody should. And I echo what you said about George Webb and the first charrette, and how inspiring he is, as well as he's just a genius as far as the research that he does. And we'll be back together. But right now, it's good. It's good to everybody just kind of stretch your wings out and do your thing, and you do your thing. Everybody does their thing. um there is something that I want to leave you with, and it's the idea of a court where we could actually have this hearing. And the name of the court is the Court of Public Opinion. And I think we can, as interested people, we can organize something, and we can then send out little summonses to people and say, "You've been summoned to the Court of Public Opinion to answer questions pertaining to X, Y, or Z." And then we go, and if they show up or don't, we present our evidence. And we put together a case that, whether it's something specific like uh, this particular molecule is synthetic, and we proved it, or we could prove that so and so is really working for the Warburgs, and it's all traced back to this. Whatever proposition we decide to prove, we could put the people that would we expect to contest us on notice and say, "We're going to do this. We can do it online. We can have a convenient time for you, for us. We can set it up. We can have a neutral uh, producer to produce the show, and we'll just take some evidence, do some testimony, introduce some exhibits, and try to prove points, and so that you guys that have been working so hard and feel frustrated can have a forum, and so let's just think about it. I think it could be an effective way of bringing a lot of attention to the amazing work that's been done by what at least dozens of us at this point. And so, yeah, everything really did start with George, and I wish him a happy holiday, and I wish you and your family a happy holiday. Your father a speedy recovery, and everyone to just be grateful, and let's uh, let's encourage each other and keep on going. Uh, Last word from you, David.
Well, I obviously want to be helpful in any way that I can as far as doing a mock trial. I mean, we talked about that before. I'm definitely interested and willing to help, and very honored that you want to work with me to help my gaining a status that would allow me to speak in a forum, in a more formal forum, so that I'm I want to be, I like being, working alone a lot, and trying to study and kind of build my background. I mean, I'm not going to get into the Bible, but when you talk about like the Jonathan Swift and his writing, like when people write in illusion, I can't, I don't want, I never liked reading that because I didn't get it. So what I'm trying to do is learn framework and characters so that when I read Jonathan Swift, I know who the real people are, or I understand sort of the inside stories. And I feel like that's maybe the same way with the Bible, is that I sort of needed a more of a background to understand, because I think that a lot of the characters and names and the things, they all come from that originally. So it's important to have a broad understanding. So I'm open. I try to be open-minded to things like that, and I definitely want to try to help you and George and the rest of the group.
Thanks very much, David. Once again, David Cranmer. Does that mean cranberry by any chance?
It's my grandma that is very much mirrors the story of, well, in many ways mirrors the story of your father. My father lost her when he was in freshman in college, and she
Uh,
was she's the Steubenville, Ohio, so she could easily be the Hessian of the family. Her a lot of University of Michigan ties. She had three generations of doctors, and she was a chemist that worked at Michigan during the Salk era. So again, like as I worry about these potential hammer of my awful relatives, that these are the kind of things that I'm thinking about, because she went fast and died of cancer. And, so I am driven to try to learn these things because, again, it doesn't seem possible that they're tangible to these bigger characters. But my suspicion is I've not been able to disprove a lot of this stuff. So I'm trying to learn it.
Well, be careful about anxiety. Um, my wife, of course, is recovering from a heart attack about 7, 8 weeks ago now, and she's doing great. But I tell you, she's become an expert in heart disease. She's reads everything,
Hmm.
and that's one of the hidden killers is anxiety, because when you if you can, it's like the fight or flight reflex. Uh, if you engage that fight or flight reflex, then your arteries will tighten up, and that's how things can get caught. Is that if you're under stress and they get uh, contracted, they contract, so that if you've got little things floating around in there, then that's where you end up with some trouble. That's the way I interpret what she was saying. So we want to learn all this stuff,
Yeah.
but we can't do it in a way that hurts our health. So this is what I've been working on too, is to try to, even in this weather, try to go out and ride a bicycle or get some good good blood flowing in a positive way,
Yeah.
and take breaks, because it is anxiety is a very dangerous thing. You're a smart guy. You'll keep an eye on it. And so,
Yeah.
enough said.
Okay.
Enough. All
Well,
right.
happy Thanksgiving, John, and Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Okay. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Bye bye now.